The sun hung low over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. Miguel Santos sat on the weathered porch of his ranch house, watching the light fade across the endless stretch of sand and scrub brush that had been his home for 37 years. His leather-worked gloves lay folded beside him, stained with honest sweat and the dust of a long day's labor. The ranch wasn't much to look at anymore. The barn needed fresh paint, and several fence posts had started to lean with age. But it was his, bought with money he'd saved working cattle drives across 3 states. Every nail, every board, every stone in the foundation represented a piece of his life's work. Miguel took a slow sip of water from his canteen and watched the shadows grow longer. In the distance, his horse Cisco grazed peacefully near the old windmill, its blades turning lazy circles in the evening breeze. The desert was quiet now, holding its breath in that sacred moment between day and night when the world seemed to pause and remember itself. He thought about his daughter Sophia, away at nursing school in Phoenix. She called every Sunday without fail, her voice bright with stories about her classes and new friends. Miguel lived for those calls. They reminded him why he worked so hard, why he pushed through the aching joints and the endless challenges of keeping a small ranch alive in an unforgiving landscape. The sound of Cisco's whinny broke his reverie. Miguel stood, his knees protesting slightly, and squinted toward the horizon. Something had disturbed the horse. Out here, you learn to pay attention to such things. Animals knew danger before humans ever sensed it. He walked down the porch steps, his boots crunching on the dry earth. The air had begun to cool, bringing relief from the day's oppressive heat. As he moved toward Cisco, he caught sight of something that made him freeze. There, about 100 yards out near the old dried creek bed, a figure lay crumpled on the ground. Miguel's hand went instinctively to the red bandana around his neck, a nervous habit from his younger days. His mind raced through possibilities. Hikers sometimes got lost out here, unprepared for the desert's harsh reality. Or it could be someone from the village 20 miles south, though few ventured this way anymore. He approached slowly, calling out, "Hello. Can you hear me?" No response came. As Miguel drew closer, his weathered face tightened with concern. It was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, collapsed near a cluster of yucca plants. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her skin burned red from sun exposure. Blood had dried on her arms and legs from numerous scratches and cuts. Most striking were her eyes as they fluttered open. Blue as a desert sky, but filled with terror. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked and desperate. "Please, water." Miguel knelt beside her, his movements careful and deliberate. He pulled his canteen from his belt and supported her head gently. "Slow sips," he said softly. "Too fast and you'll be sick." The woman drank greedily despite his warning, water spilling down her chin. Her whole body trembled. Miguel could see she was in bad shape. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her face streaked with dried tears and dust. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Rachel," she managed between desperate gulps of water. "Rachel Morrison. I'm Miguel. You're on my ranch now. You're safe." But even as he said the words, Rachel's eyes widened with fresh panic. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her fingernails digging into his skin. "No," she gasped. "No, I'm not. They're coming. They're still looking for me." Miguel felt a cold stone settle in his stomach. "Who's looking for you, Rachel?" "The men," she whispered, her eyes darting to the horizon. "The ones who took me. I escaped but they're out there. They have trucks. They have guns." Her voice rose with hysteria. "I'm begging you, hurry up. We have to hide. We have to get out of here before they find me again." Miguel's jaw tightened. In his years on this land, he'd seen plenty. Smugglers sometimes crossed through, though he'd never had trouble with them. Once, he'd found a family of migrants and given them food and water before pointing them toward town. But this was different. This was darker. "How many men?" he asked. "3, maybe 4. Rachel tried to sit up but swooned, nearly collapsing again. "Please, I can't go back there." Miguel made his decision quickly. He scooped Rachel into his arms, surprised by how light she was. Weeks of captivity had left her frighteningly thin. "Hold on to me," he said. "I'm taking you to the house." As he carried her across the desert floor, Rachel clung to his neck, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "They'll kill you," she whispered. If they find you helping me, they'll kill you too. Let me worry about that, Miguel replied. Inside the ranch house, he settled Rachel on his old sofa and brought her more water, along with a bowl of yesterday's stew that he warmed on the stove. While she ate with the desperation of someone who'd been starving, Miguel moved through the house with purpose. He pulled down the old rifle that hung above the fireplace. His father's rifle, handed down through 2 generations. Miguel had never shot a man in his life. He'd hunted deer for food and once had to put down a rabid coyote, but the thought of aiming at another human being made his stomach turn. Still, he loaded it. How long since you escaped? He asked Rachel. She looked up from the bowl, tears streaming down her face. This morning, early. They kept me in a house about 10 miles east of here, I think. Near some abandoned buildings. I waited until they were all asleep and I ran. She wiped her eyes roughly. I just ran and ran. I didn't think I'd make it. I thought I'd die out there. Miguel pulled a chair across from her and sat down. His dark eyes studied her face, seeing not just the physical damage but the deeper wounds that would take much longer to heal. How long did they have you? He asked gently. Rachel's hands shook as she set down the bowl. 3 weeks. They grabbed me outside Tucson. I was hitchhiking, trying to get to California. Stupid, I know. Everyone told me not to, but I thought. She trailed off, fresh tears falling. It doesn't matter what I thought. Miguel reached out and placed his rough, calloused hand over hers. You survived, Rachel. That takes strength. A sound from outside made them both freeze. The rumble of an engine in the distance, growing louder. Rachel's face went white. They found me, she breathed. Oh God, they found me. Miguel stood and moved to the window, peering through the faded curtains. A truck was approaching, its headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Behind it, another vehicle followed. His hand tightened on the rifle. Every instinct screamed at him to hide, to protect himself, to claim he'd seen nothing. He was just one man, getting older, with a daughter who needed him. What right did he have to risk his life for a stranger? But when he looked back at Rachel, curled on his sofa with her eyes squeezed shut in terror, he saw Sophia. He saw the daughter he'd raised to be strong and kind. He saw the world he wanted her to live in, a world where people helped each other instead of looking away. Get in the back room, he told Rachel. Under the bed. Don't come out no matter what you hear. They'll hurt you, Rachel sobbed. Maybe, Miguel said, but they won't hurt you. Not again. Not while I'm breathing. Rachel hesitated, then stumbled to her feet and disappeared into the back of the house. Miguel heard the bedroom door close. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped out onto the porch. The trucks pulled to a stop in a cloud of dust. 3 men climbed out, and Miguel's trained eye assessed them quickly. The first was tall and thick, with a scarred face and mean eyes. The second was younger, nervous, his hand twitching near his belt. The third stayed by the truck, watching. The scarred man approached with false friendliness in his voice. Evening, friend. We're looking for something that belongs to us. A girl, about 25, blonde hair. You seen anyone like that around here? Miguel kept his face neutral, his voice steady. I haven't seen anyone. Just me and my horse out here. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now see, that's funny. Because we tracked her footprints right to your property. And those prints just disappear right about where your house stands. He took a step closer. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is she? Miguel adjusted his grip on the rifle, not raising it but making sure it was visible. Like I said, I haven't seen anyone. You're welcome to look around outside, but you're not setting foot in my house. The scarred man's smile vanished. Old man, you don't know what you're getting into. That girl is merchandise. She belongs to people who don't take kindly to their property being stolen. She's not property, Miguel said quietly. She's a human being. Is that right? The man's hand moved to the gun at his hip. And are you willing to die for that human being? Because that's what's about to happen here unless you hand her over. Miguel's heart pounded in his chest. Fear coursed through him, cold and sharp. But stronger than the fear was something else. It was the memory of his mother's voice, telling him stories about his grandfather who'd hidden families during dangerous times. It was the weight of every Sunday phone call with Sophia, every time she told him about helping people at the hospital. It was the understanding that some moments define who you were and who you'll always be. The rancher took a step closer. The scarred man tensed, his hand moving to draw his weapon. And then Miguel did the unthinkable. He lowered his rifle completely, setting it against the porch railing. His hands came up, empty and open. "I'm not going to shoot you," Miguel said calmly. "And you're not going to shoot me." The scarred man laughed, incredulous. "And why the hell not?" "Because I just called the sheriff's department 15 minutes ago," Miguel lied smoothly. "They're on their way right now. I told them I had suspicious vehicles on my property and I felt threatened. They'll be here in less than 10 minutes. It was a complete bluff. Miguel hadn't called anyone, but he delivered it with such conviction, such calm certainty, that doubt flickered across the scarred man's face. "You're lying," the man said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Am I?" Miguel asked. "You willing to bet on that? Because if you shoot me and the sheriff shows up, you're looking at murder charges along with whatever else you've done. And if that girl in there tells her story," he shook his head slowly, "you'll never see daylight again." The three men exchanged glances. Miguel could see the calculation happening behind their eyes. Risk versus reward. The younger one was already backing toward the truck. "There's another way to look at this," Miguel continued, his voice still calm. "You leave now, and there's no evidence. No witnesses except people who won't talk to police anyway. You disappear into the desert and maybe you have a chance. But you stay here, you try to take her by force, and everything falls apart." Sirens wailed in the distance. Miguel felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. It was impossible, miraculous. He hadn't called them, but someone had. Later, he would learn that Cisco's owner from the next property over had seen the trucks and thought Miguel might be having trouble. The old rancher network, looking out for each other like they had for generations. The scarred man spat in the dust. "This isn't over, old man." "Yes," Miguel said firmly. "It is." The three men climbed back into their trucks. Engines roared to life, and they disappeared into the darkness just as the sheriff's vehicle crested the hill, lights flashing. Miguel sat down heavily on the porch steps, his whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief. Sheriff Tom Bradley, who'd known Miguel for 20 years, approached with concern written across his face. "Miguel, what's going on?" And so Miguel told him. Everything. The sheriff took Rachel's statement, gentle and professional. He radioed for additional units and an ambulance. As Rachel was being checked by the paramedics, she looked back at Miguel with tears streaming down her face. "Why?" she asked him. "Why did you risk everything for me? You don't even know me." Miguel thought about his answer carefully. He thought about Sophia, about the kind of world he wanted her to inherit. He thought about his grandfather and his mother and every lesson they'd taught him about what it meant to be human. "Because someone needed help," he said simply. "And I was there." 3 months later, Miguel received a letter from Rachel. She was in counseling, working through her trauma with professional help. She'd reconnected with her family. She was learning to live again, slowly putting the pieces of her shattered life back together. She wrote, "You gave me back my life. Not just by saving me that night, but by showing me that good people still exist. That kindness isn't dead. I think about what you did, how you put yourself at risk for a complete stranger, and it gives me hope. I'm trying to be brave like you were. I'm trying to believe the world can be better." Miguel folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, next to the photos of Sophia and the deed to his ranch. That evening, he sat on his porch as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. Cisco grazed peacefully near the windmill. The desert was quiet, holding its breath in that sacred moment between day and night. And Miguel Santos, rancher and father, guardian of this small piece of the world, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He had looked into the darkness and hadn't flinched. He had been afraid but had chosen courage anyway. And in doing so, he'd reminded himself of a simple truth. We are defined not by the comfort we maintain but by the stands we take when everything is at risk. The desert taught hard lessons. It was unforgiving and brutal and indifferent to human suffering. But it also taught that life was precious precisely because it was fragile. That every moment mattered. That every choice carried weight. As the stars began to appear overhead, ancient and patient, Miguel smiled. Sophia would be calling tomorrow. He would tell her the story, not to frighten her but to share what he'd learned. That courage wasn't the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it. That goodness wasn't naive or weak but the hardest, strongest choice a person could make. The night wind whispered across the desert floor, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of another dawn. Miguel rose from his porch, his joints protesting slightly, and went inside his small ranch house. He slept well that night, the sleep of the just and the weary, while the desert kept its eternal watch outside his window.